know her, who was actually knitting and not weaving. We started meeting together, the five of us, to share and learn more about quilt making. We were barely aware of how many others across the USA were doing likewise, because at that time there were not all the magazines, and not all the books, and not all the TV programs, etc. Many of us had BFAs or MFAs in some other area of the arts, but all of us were totally self-taught in quilt making, full of energy, making big works, just as our ancestors had. By 1976, I had started to teach one-day and two-day classes. Not many, but I was discovering what I wanted to teach and how to teach. I was also starting to accumulate a pile of big quilts. I'm saying big because everything was 96 by 96. And becoming increasingly frustrated at the lack of opportunity to exhibit my work. I wanted to exhibit in venues dedicated to promoting quilt making as an art form. Sometime in 1977, Harriet Anderson approached me to see if she could hire me to teach a longer workshop. Instead of saying yes to her offer of teaching, I challenged her. I stated that instead of offering more workshops, could we possibly find a venue to hold a major exhibition of contemporary quilts that would showcase what was being made both in the United States and internationally. I don't know, any of you who knew Harriet, you understand what I'm going to say next. Boom! Harriet grabbed on, rose up, and ran with the idea. Forceful, unafraid, determined. She was a born leader. Plus, she knew about the empty dairy barn out on Dairy Lane, awaiting its fate of being destroyed. She and her husband Andy approached our Ohio legislature and miraculously saved the barn from its fate, paying $1 for a 100-year lease. The next part was the eye-opener for me. At the first meeting organized by Harriet, all the naysayers came to sit and scowl and to say no and impossible, shouting, "There's no money to do this." I remember a knot starting in my stomach from listening to all of their negativity. I had pinned so much hope on making this venue happen. Harriet, undeterred, and she was a tall, dramatic woman in her late 50s or early 60s at the time, told me after the meeting she would make sure that all negative types would not be coming back. And they did not. And I have no idea of how she made it happen. But her doing so taught me one of the most valuable lessons I have ever learned, which is when you have a dream, tune out the negativity and push forward no matter what. Let me end by saying this. Many people, and many people probably here tonight, came to help turn this barn into a gallery. Volunteers of all ages, digging out the tons of manure, still in the barn, bagging it, selling it to gardeners, washing down the walls and the ceiling, repairing what could be repaired without money, filling the manure pits that ran up and down the barn with pea gravel so nobody would fall into them. But leaving the milking stanchions in place because there was no viable way to remove them at the time. Imagine quilts hanging next to milking stanchions. And there they were, all the way down the barn, up and down.
And they were beautiful.
It was just a wonder, could it happen today? When the first Quilt National finally opened in 1979, I stood in awe of the grandiosity of those 80 large pieces hanging from the ceiling, beautifully installed by Doreen and Fred Pellini. It was so terribly exciting, just hugely exciting and thrilling. But in seconds, my awe turned to shock, unbelieving shock, when I realized that thousands of flies were darting everywhere around the huge quilts. Buzzing, darting floor to ceiling, clinging to every surface, stuck to the windows, and horridly even resting on the quilts themselves. All I could think was, we are going to be crucified. And we are really going to be crucified for returning quilts with fly specks all over them. But we survived. The quilts survived, and in the end, we all made it happen. Thank you.